This is StewardShift, a show that gives you the tools you need to get the most of your best resources. Your money, your mind, your body, your time.
Welcome back to StewardShift. I'm so excited because we have a very special guest on. This is my friend. This is my brother. He is a CFP, a certified financial planner, and so much more that I'm going to explain in just a second. Let's go on and bring him on. Brenton, so good to have you on today.
I appreciate you having me, bro.
Brenton, you are one of the very few Black certified financial planners. From what I understand, there are fewer than 4% of you, but you also have this other designation, the Certified Student Loan Professional designation, and just kind of that combination of, first of all, just all CFPs in general, as well as those who have that particular designation is a very, very small pool. But for African Americans, like, dude, we're talking about a handful, maybe two. How did you get into that that particular niche? What happened? Were you working with clients were you like, what was this?
So when I started in financial services pretty early on, I had a passion for helping people who were like my parents. And my dad is a physician and first generation high income earner. So he was navigating student loans, taking care of his parents, taking care of his siblings, trying to build a life for his own. And throughout that process, there was just a lack of financial literacy. So when I started working with people who were like him, a lot of them had a lot of student loan debt. And you get to a point where you establish some skills and you establish some experience, but you don't have that mark on you. And I wanted to expose myself to some more specified knowledge, but also have my mark, my stamp. And I started doing the education requirements for Certified Financial Planner, which is really a 2+ year process. It takes 3 to 4 months to sit and study for the exam, but the education process is a couple years. I did that. I finished it. And I have this saying that annoys my wife, to all get out. But I say, there's nothing to it but to do it. And once you do it, it'll be done. And that motivates me to finish the work. So I finished my CFP. I'd done all this work. And if you already had your CFP, it was essentially an extra week's worth of work and another exam to get my certified student loan professional. And was it easy? No. But again, and nothing to it but to do it. And once you do it, it'll be done. I just couldn't let that 1 week stop me from having that extra stamp to tell people that I serve. I have my marks. I have my stamp. I've gone through an exhaustive process to make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Dude, big ups to you for doing this for the culture, for families that really, really need this. And I believe that God is just going to put you on higher heights, man. I really, really believe that, and send you to serve. Not even send, man. There are going to be people who are coming to you to be served by the gifts and skills that you've been given. So that's awesome. But you also have 2 podcasts, not one, but 2. The one that I've listened to so many times is the New Money, New Problem podcast. But you also have another one, Escape Student Loan Debt podcast. So, dude, you're just like in this space, and the service to people that really, really need this is awesome. So let's get to that New Money, New Problems. First of all, I just love that script, that title. It's just so needed. But what kinds of money problems are you noticing in this generation that our parents rather didn't have to deal with?
They had to deal with them, but not to the same degree at all. And those 3 problems would be affordable housing, affordable education, and affordable childcare. I talked about my dad. The first home that my parents purchased was in Madison, Tennessee, a little north of Nashville, where I live. And that house cost them $89,000. And
what year was this?
This was maybe 83. And, between 83 and now, maybe you think that home would triple in value if you just look at inflation. So I looked just for fun before we were recording this podcast, and the value of that home that they bought for $89,000 is now $690,000. It has gone up more than 700%. So there is no apples to apples comparison between what it cost for them to get in that home, the sacrifice that had to be made, and what a family has to make now. If you look at childcare, not even going back to when they had to pay for childcare, which when they paid for childcare, it was an old lady at the church who just watched a bunch of kids from the church at their house. That was childcare. There was not the same emphasis on pre-K and all of these high-priced daycares. You know, I spend a significant amount between my wife and I for my son's childcare. And if you look at what it cost just this year or last year compared to pre-pandemic, childcare costs have gone up like 40% in 2 years. It's an extreme expense. And then the last thing is student loans. While our parents may have had student loans, they were not such a barrier to their financial existence that it caused them to delay purchasing a home, having children like people in our generation, where on the low end, you go to just a private undergraduate school, you could leave with $100,000. If you go to a private med school, dental school, you could leave owing $400,000 plus. That is a life-altering amount of money that they didn't have to deal with.
Real talk, man. I do some financial coaching, and I also have a program that I run for people, curriculum. But as I was doing this group coaching, someone told me that she had almost $400,000 of student loans. Now, mind you, she's an attorney, but you know, it was just like so mind blowing. I had never heard that high amount. I knew that they were high amounts, but that high, that's mind blowing to me and crippling. I can only imagine the crippling effect that has on people.
You're right. The amounts that people owe are mind-boggling. And I would tell you that I come across people consistently who owe north of $400,000. And the way that they manage their finances, even when you speak to what older generations dealt with, if they had a significant amount of debt, there were the Dave Ramseys of the world who would motivate them to get out of debt. They would give them tools to get out of a certain amount of debt. But there is no envelope system to get out of some of those sums. You need to have that skill set. It's a good motivation to have. It may be the way that you deal with some of the other debts that you have in your life, but with things like $400,000, $500,000, which I know people who owe north of $500,000, you also need to be acutely aware of the different resources to have them forgiven, or how to navigate them while also building wealth. Because if you tried to wait until you paid them off before you invested, you would die and you would have still a little bit left on your student loans and no money in the bank.
So I guess this begs a deeper question, and this isn't even part of the list of questions. What needs to happen here, just from your perspective? I'm interested. Is the problem student loans? Is the problem the soaring costs of education? What's going on here just in today's climate surrounding borrowing for education?
There's a book called The Debt Trap that is a very depressing book, but it explains why we're in the situation that we're in, because the answer is both and. The problem is education costs and student loans, but the reason it's both and is because when student loans were invented, the way that they were structured from their invention to now incentivized schools to increase their costs, because we reached a point, especially for graduate school, where there was no limitation on the amounts that students could borrow for school. So if you are a school that offers graduate degree programs, there's no incentive for you to keep your costs low because you know that the students can borrow the money. So that's all the reason that you need to say, hey, we're going to bump the tuition up 15%, 20% over the course of 3 to 4 years. Also, there was a period in time where the Department of Education was trying to lean more on grants that people wouldn't have to repay. But that's not profitable. If you're giving away money versus getting money back, there was also a period in time where they completely abdicated the responsibility of managing that debt to private companies. So now you're mixing private companies with public good, and there's not much good that can come from it. So that book lays out the entire history of it. But now you have this system where the costs have gotten so high that it's kind of hard to pull it back. And student loans are just now a necessary evil of people educating themselves. But it costs so much that you get to the point where you wonder, is it worth it in some cases?
That's always a huge question, and a question that I've asked so many times. Is it worth it? And of course, now we're kind of delving into another completely different set of issues and conversation, which I'll digress. But I would like to say that I think there's this element of I absolutely need student loans to get through school. That just from my perspective, and if you have a perspective that disagrees with this, no problem. It's just that need to do that. So, full disclosure, my wife just finished her DNP, Doctor of Nursing Practice, this year, a few months ago. And we paid it without student loans. Reason why we did that is because we had previously gotten out of debt several years ago. Most of that debt, as you can guess, was student loans. And we didn't want that story again of getting our heads beaten over by student loans yet again. So we made a very, very intentional choice. And there were a lot of choices that we made leading up to her starting. She started in 2020 that created the room and maybe even the freedom for us to make that choice. So one of the hugest things that we did was live way below our means. So we live in a home that it's been a huge blessing to us, but it's, a lot smaller than the previous home that we had bought and sold because we knew that, all right, at some point, Rochelle does want to start school, and we don't want to do that with debt. So, man, we bankrolled, we cash flowed that whole thing, and just wondering if there's an element of where people think that this is an absolute necessary thing, necessary evil, as you said, but is there another way of, hey, if we live below our means, we can actually get this done? I'm just wondering from your experience, is that a thing out there that you've experienced?
I believe, and there are reasons behind the specific numbers that I'm going to share. I believe a lot of it starts with getting to the student when they're choosing where they're going to be educated and the degree that they're going to pursue. The fact of the matter is there are some degrees where the average payout, and you may choose a different path within that field that pays you more than the average person, but the average payout will just dictate you going to a school that doesn't cost as much. I'm not going to go to a school that costs $100,000 a year if I'm pursuing a degree that on average pays $50,000 a year, because the return on investment is just not going to be as great, in my opinion. The one caveat to that is if you plan after you get that degree to pursue public service, there are avenues where you can have that debt forgiven in a shorter period of time. But to me, I think that we are to the point where school costs so much where we don't want to tell people to not go to the school of their dreams. We don't want to tell people you can't be everything that you want to be in the world. And that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying if you're going to pursue a degree that you know doesn't pay that much, and you have the opportunity to have a full ride somewhere else or go to a state school that pays you to attend or gives you grants or costs significantly less, it's at least part of the consideration. Now, I happen to go to a private school that costs a lot of money and met my wife there and met you there and met friends that I cherish. So it's tough to have those conversations, especially if you yourself got to benefit from something you're telling them to avoid. But you're also trying to look out for that person when they're 30 and 40 and 50 years old and say, I want you to at least be aware that this is the other side of that conversation. I so wish, even down to when I picked my major, that I had someone who was willing to be frank with me about some of the things that come with the decisions that you make at 18, 19. But sometimes we are hesitant to have those conversations because we feel like we're discouraging. And I think there's a balance that you can strike that says, if you want to do this, pursue it, but let me at least make you aware of some of the things that come with that pursuit.
Got you. Going back to something that you said earlier, just about the dynamic of student loans actually having this effect of increasing the cost of education. I have this idea, and let me know what you think, man. We're talking frankly here. Anytime you have the dynamic of buy now, pay later in any of its forms, there's going to be a cost that you pay on that pay later side of things, right? And I think that, one of the most obvious forms and probably quickest forms are these buy now, pay later companies like Klarna and Afterpay, so on and so forth, where you jump on a website and you want a pair of jeans, but the jeans maybe cost too much for what you can afford here and now. So you have these options of paying in installments over the next 4 months or so. So that's probably an obvious form, but I'm not sure that people see student loans as a form of that. I do. You're buying the education now while paying for it after time. And the vast majority of the time, just kind of my idea of things is that when you do that, you're going to get bitten usually pretty hard on the back end of things, which I think America has seen. We all hear the cries of student loans, student loans, student loans. And this is what it is. Anytime you have that, what are your thoughts on that, man?
It's not real until you're in it. And you can tell a child that, but it's not real until they're paying it back themselves. You mentioned that I got my CFP. What I didn't share is that initially, my dad and my mom had made a commitment to helping me get through if I wanted to do like some type of graduate degree. Hey, we'll contribute something towards your MBA or your PhD, something of that nature. And I decided not to pursue those things and get certifications. And I started the CFP process once before and didn't complete it. And I actually believe that a part of it was because of the fact that my parents were helping. So they paid for like the first course, which is nowhere near the cost of like a college course, but they helped pay for that first course. And I didn't take it seriously. I didn't study like I should have. I didn't integrate it into my life schedule. And I fell off. And when I started having to pay for it myself in real time, I was confronted with what you're talking about. It's almost like I would have had the opportunity to deal with that decision later, but by deciding to pay for it now, it made it more real for me. It made me own up to the cost of what it takes to actually get through the program. And I think that when you do the buy now, pay later, you're kicking that can of realization down the road, right? Instead of having it in that moment, you're having it after. And now you're thinking about how well did I utilize that degree? Was there another way to pursue it? Because now I'm having to deal with the repercussions of it. And I don't even know if I maximized the experience. So I'm not a fan of the buy now, pay later. There are times when I'm okay deferring payments if it's in pursuit of like more flexibility elsewhere or investing elsewhere. So I don't necessarily think that you should pay a lump sum for everything that you purchase if it's giving you the flexibility to save here or pay down debt somewhere else. But if it's just a matter of I could pay it now and I choose not to, that realization is just getting kicked down the road.
You touched on it just a little bit. What strategies would you suggest for this generation of parents to employ for our children to avoid student loans in the future? Because we can continue to cry about it, but if we continue to do the same things, then our generations after us will experience the same things that we've experienced times 10 or whatever. So what strategies are we looking at for our kids to not have to have the same struggles that we've had?
My goal for my son is that by the time he gets to school, he's acutely aware of how the process works of paying for it. Now, if we can pay for it, I don't mind paying for it, because I don't want him to have that burden upon his graduation. But I also want him to be aware that there are some benefits to, hey, if I want to go to this school, maybe I can take some of my general ed requirements at a community college before I get to that school. So now I'm only having to pay for the major courses. Maybe I can take some classes in the summer. Maybe I can do work study programs that will defer the cost or lower the cost so that this burden isn't as big as it has to be. And some of those things are things that we did. Both my wife and I took classes in the summer. I worked in the phys ed department for Mr. Roddy. You remember Mr. Roddy for Oakwood? I worked for him to lower the cost of schooling, and I had a scholarship. So my parents helped with the excess above those things, but I had multiple things working for me. I did a cotillion my senior year and raised a significant amount of money that essentially paid for my whole first quarter of school. So there was a lower cost than it had to be because of some of those elements. I want my son, and I think people should want their children to be aware of the ways that they can lower the cost of their education. I also think that they should be aware before they go to school of where their interests lie. Because what if my son is pursuing a degree and in actuality, he has more interest in a trade? Well, I would want him to have some exposure to that before he went to school. When our parents were in school, they had vocational schools or they at least had shop class. There were things that they had the opportunity to put their hands on and have experience with. So I plan to expose my son to carpentry, woodworking, electrical work, just doing things with his hands, doing things outside, or just a more specified skill set that doesn't require a degree. And if he still pursues it, that's because he knows what else is out there and still wants to do the degree.
Love it. So what I'm hearing from you is number one, let's make sure that we're doing something to earn money towards that. So whatever, maybe it's working or raising money or something like that. Let's choose a career that as much as we possibly can. And I know sometimes that can be tough for 18-year-olds. But as much as we possibly can, let's expose our kids to various things that they can understand that maybe the classic path of education, 4-year college degree may not necessarily be for you. And I think for some parents that's scary. Who doesn't want their child to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something like that? Those are kind of those three main things that are big money makers. But obviously those paths aren't for everyone. In fact, they're not for the majority of people. I love that. I think that exposure is going to be super important just to make sure that they're making some decisions that as hard as it can be for 18-year-olds, that they can make decisions that they can bounce back from if it's the wrong decision. They're not stuck in a rut of tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and they're not operating in their calling, if that makes sense.
And sometimes exposure is just that. It's letting you know what you don't want to do. There's a family, the Pelote family, who are as close to me as family can get. And the youngest of their children, Bud, Eddie, is like a little brother to me. And when he was in school, the first summer he came home from Oakwood, I got him a job with a friend of mine doing landscaping work. And he was working as hard as you can work outside all day, and he was making good money. And towards the end of the summer, he said, "Man, I made some great money, but I am exhausted. I cannot believe people do this." And I said, "Well, good. At least you know that there's a career out there that you don't want to do." And that's what he learned that summer. I do not want to be outside. I need to be indoors with the air conditioning, right? Sometimes exposure is just about letting you know what you don't want to do. And unfortunately, because we don't expose our kids to that many things, the way that they find out that is going to school and picking a major that if they had some exposure prior to, they would have known they never wanted to do that, right? But now you burn a year of schooling, taking classes that you hate or are not suited to, taking out loans to pay for those classes, and now you're just in school an extra year because you switch majors.
All right, so we're at the point in this show where, man, we got to put a scripture on this. Is there a verse or story from the Bible that helps to emphasize these ideals that you're talking about?
Two of my favorite scriptures. The first, a man's gifts will make room for him and put him before great men. When I think of some of the opportunities that I've been afforded, they're all blessings. But I think that the common thread for some of those opportunities is that I have tried my best to listen when people are responding to something that I'm putting out in the world. So when I started doing this and people started saying, "Man, you explain things in a way that make it very easy for me to digest." A lot of times when people talk about money, it's so complex that I can't really connect with it. I tried to lean into that. I tried to put myself in positions where I was honing and mastering that skill set. And I tried to do it regardless of whether or not I was getting paid or whether or not the audience could give something back to me. And after years of doing that, now I'm being put in places where the opportunities are bigger. The opportunities are more frequently paid. Sometimes there are things that I get in return. But the connecting thread is that I'm giving value to someone and I'm being rewarded for, just leaning into the gift and using it in a way that could benefit others. So that's one of my favorites. The second, and I don't know the exact text, but the parable of the talents. And you and I have talked about this. This is my favorite story in the Bible. And my favorite element of the parable of the talents is that each of the servants were given a different number of talents. But the scripture actually says, and I think this is the part that's typically missed, it was not random, the number that was assigned or given to each servant. We like to think that they were just, part of the story to illustrate what it's like to be a good steward of resources. But in actuality, there's a part in the parable where it says that the master gave to each servant according to his abilities. And I love that so much because it lets you know it is not random at all, some of the opportunities that were presented. A lot of it has to do with what the Lord knows, because he knows what we're going to do before we do it, right? So he knows what we're going to do with the gift before the gift is given to us. And he also knows the preparation that we've made in advance of the gift to take advantage of it. And based on those factors, it can determine how large the gift will be. And I love that because when you talk about preparation, when you talk about stewardship, when you talk about being willing to take whatever you have and just add something on top of it, that mindset alone could be the difference between you getting an opportunity and not getting an opportunity.
I love it, man. You sound like a preacher, man. No, this is good. That's great. And I think that particular distinction away from randomness and towards, hey, this was by design. This is according to the ability. I think that's a powerful idea, powerful thought there. All right. So you've heard it straight from the source's mouth. Brenton, I need you to, as we're winding the show down for today, there's some shifts that people need to make. There's some takeaways. There are some CTA, some calls to action that need to happen. Some people will take something small away. Other people will make some super shifts in their lives. But let's start with a small shift. What is something small that someone can do today, right now, to nudge themselves in the right direction?
I would determine my preferred hourly rate for professional and personal life. And that concept was actually introduced to me by Courtney Hale, mutual friend of ours. But knowing your hourly rate that you expect to receive at work, it gives you an idea of the type of jobs that you should be taking. It also gives you an idea of whether your skill set matches up to what your preferred hourly rate is right now. Like you can say that you want to make $100,000, but do you have a resume? Do you have a skill set that dictates you earning $100,000? If you don't, that's no problem. But at least by knowing that that's what you want to make, breaking it down to an hourly rate, you can start to connect the dots between what you need to do to build yourself up to it. The other reason I like people knowing their hourly rate is, let's say that there's a rate that you're earning now. Maybe it's not even your preferred hourly rate. Maybe you're making $35 an hour right now. It can also dictate some of the things that you do or do not do in your personal life. So for example, if you make $35 an hour and it takes you 2 hours to fold your clothes and wash your laundry, but you could pay somebody else $15 an hour to do it, that's something that is worth offloading because you can use that time to either rest and recuperate or build up your skill set to make $50 an hour. So I think people should know their hourly rate.
That's powerful. All right, y'all. So get your hourly rate down now. Let's write it down. Let's figure that out. And that's a very small shift that you can make. For those who want to make a super shift in their lives, something big that someone can do today or start doing today to create major change, what would you suggest?
It's kind of connected to the hourly rate. I would determine your walkaway number. And this is a concept that I've been leaning into more frequently. We're actually going to do a podcast about it this week. You've heard of the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. You've heard about people who are digital nomads where they might be taking less money, but they're doing it with the flexibility to work how they choose to work. I am not a person who believes in the concept of retirement. I don't think there's a biblical precedent for retirement. I think you should always wake up with something to do. Doesn't necessarily need to be making money, but I think you should wake up with a purpose. But I do believe that there's a point where the pursuit becomes excessive. There's an amount of money that I know for my life, if I earn above that, it's gravy, but I don't need it. Like if I can make a certain amount and I can live my life within that amount and make it more flexible, spend more time with my family, I want to know that number because it helps me keep perspective on what's important in life. So let's say for somebody, they want to make 500,000. But they look at their expenses and their lifestyle and they say, you know what, if I were making 200,000, I could meet all my needs. I could travel. I could take care of family. I could be charitable, and I could spend way more time with my family than if I pursued 500,000. You should at least know that, because I would want you to have some awareness that all of this stuff doesn't get to go with us when we leave this place. And there are things that are more important than money. Money is just a tool to do some of the things that we like to do in this life. So that walkaway number, whether it's an amount of cash or a yearly income, gives me perspective that says, if I get to an end of a year and I could make X amount more dollars, but it cost me time with the people I love, and I've already hit my walkaway number, dude, go home and spend some time with your family.
All right, Brenton, tell me a bottom line. Like, if people don't do what you're suggesting, what could they be wasting? Or if they do what you suggest, how much could they be saving? Give us a bottom line. Give us something here for people to take away.
Time is the thing that is costing them. And if you go back to your hourly rate, you can just multiply that by how much time you lost by not taking advantage of some of the things at your disposal, and you can put a number to it. But to me, the only resource that we can't get back is time. So to me, the longer you wait to put some of these things in place, the more stress that's going to be on you, the more consequential the decision is by you waiting. So to me, the best time to take advantage of your finances is now. And the longer you wait, the more it costs you, because it costs you more time.
All right, Brenton, as we close this show out for today, where can people follow you and find you?
On IG, we're newmoney.newproblems. The podcast is the New Money, New Problems podcast. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So YouTube, really, if you just type in New Money, New Problems, you can find us on all your favorite platforms. And for people who are trying to be a part of our community and are trying to take advantage of time, right? I want to start with my finances being improved today. We've put together a 30 money moves challenge. So that's really the best way I think people can engage with our community. It's a 30-day email series where you get a video from us each day with a task that you can complete that we feel will transform your finances over the course of 30 days. So I'll give you the link. You can put it in the show notes, and we'd love if people would take the 30 Money Moves Challenge with us.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it, my brother. This has been great. People are going to be super blessed, not just by this episode, but by your service to them. I've already been blessed over the years. We've done several events together, and I'm always blessed by the information and motivation that you provide me and for the people that you serve. So much appreciated. Thank you so much.